Good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be welcoming you here. I'm Mike Posner. I direct the Center for Business and Human Rights at NYU Stern. And tonight we are very lucky, very fortunate to have Rubana join us for the Sani lecture, which we're going to have a great hour. Ashok, Sani, for whom this lecture was named, was a distinguished graduate of our school. He was a successful entrepreneur, president of the CGS Industries. He was a loyal supporter of NYU Stern, a founding member of the Alumni Council, and the Ashok Sani Scholar Program shares Mr. Sani's interest in ethics, truth, peace, compassion, and the moral and social responsibilities of members of society with the NYU Stern community. It's a perfect way to introduce this lecture because it also defines our terrific speaker tonight, Rubana and the life she's lived. I also want to say a special thanks to the director of the Business and Society program, Batya Wiesenfeld, who's done a fantastic job, has been at Stern for many years, chaired the Management Organizations Department for a number of years, and in the last 4 years has come and really brought new life to the Business and Society program, of which I'm a proud member and our center is a proud member. Tonight we have a great guest, a great speaker, Rubana, who's going to speak to the theme of empowering women garment workers in Bangladesh from Rana Plaza to an entrepreneurial future. Rubana is a woman for all seasons. She's a very successful businesswoman, chaired the Mohammadi Group, was a managing director there for 20 some years, and then chaired it from 2017 until recently. She was the CEO of TV South Asia. She's a poet, she's a scholar. She was the first woman chair of the BGMEA, the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association. She sat on a board with about 35 men and managed by the strength of her personality and her will and her determination to actually become the chair of that organization. And she's also more recently become the vice chancellor of the Asian University for Women, which is a quite extraordinary new university in Chittagong, Bangladesh, and perhaps we'll get a chance to talk about that. In 2013 and 14, she was part of the BBC 100 Women series. And for us, it's a special pleasure to have had her for the first, last semester and next, as an executive in residence at NYU Stern and working with our center. So Rubana, first of all, welcome. I want to just start, you're going to give the lecture, but I want to tee it up. I came to NYU in 2013 in March from the State Department with a colleague, Sarah Labowitz, and 5 weeks after we arrived, the factory complex in Dhaka at Rana Plaza collapsed. 1,100 people killed, 2,500 injured. It was the the largest industrial accident since Bhopal. And we jumped in to try to figure out, is there some useful thing that we at a university could do? We held a meeting in September of that year, and we began a relationship with you now 9 years old. And one of the things that was most exciting and interesting is that we, in a way, broke through a kind of stereotype of which has sort of great Western brands trying to do the right thing and people living and working in places like Bangladesh being the culprits, the people who are in need of greater, being pushed. And you immediately jumped out among all of your colleagues within the industry and within Bangladesh as somebody who shared our, desire to figure out some practical ways to make the system work better. And so it's been for me a real honor and a pleasure to work with you. And I'm delighted to welcome you to our audience tonight and encourage you to say some opening words and give the lecture, and then we'll do some Q&A, you and I, and then with the rest, we'll open it up for questions from the audience. So welcome, Rubana, coming to us live from Dhaka.
Thank you very much, Mike, for having me today. And that was a perfect tee off, actually. Yes, we met in 2013, September, and yes, we've had great 9 years. I mean, I think the industry and academia bridge that we always talk about, it wouldn't have come to fruition if Stern hadn't stepped in at that point. So to everyone else who perhaps don't know me at all, I'm Rubana from Bangladesh, joining in. It's 4 a.m. in the morning here, but it's an absolute delight to be joining you all. So I'm from Bangladesh, and I'm also a manufacturer of ready-made garments. And the story of ready-made garments in Bangladesh is a unique one, because in about 4 decades, Bangladesh has become the second largest exporter in the world, next to China. From around $31 million worth of export, we have risen to 34 billion plus. From having only 120,000 workers, we've gone up to 4.4 million workers, out of which 65% are women. You know, the total export of Bangladesh, this sector contributes to about 83.47%. So it's been quite a journey. And today, I'm proud to say that the sector pays around $423 million worth of wages every month. Having said all that, I'll take you back to 2013, and that's a memory I cherish, because at the cost of a great national collective tragedy, the nation learned a big lesson. 1,134 lives were lost during the Rana Plaza collapse, and it was painful to see how we had not addressed many issues in the industry that we ought to have. So immediately the brands and the unions came together, and they then formed a very strong alliance called Accord, and a very strong alliance called Alliance itself. So Alliance Alliance came into being from North America, and Accord was mainly European, with only 1 or 2 American brands in there. And these platforms came together, and what they did was they came to Bangladesh and made sure that we remediated in terms of fire, in terms of structural, and in terms of electrical compliance. And 1,600 plus factories were registered. We had to immediately, it was a very prescriptive platform, but we had no choice. We did not have any local capacity building at that point. We were not equipped to properly fight fires, or look at our structural integrity of the buildings. And so the journey began. And while we continued with the journey, we also concentrated on a lot of local capacity building. But when Stern came in, when Mike came in, and and Sarah came in, it was a delight, because what they did was they engaged with us and tried to find ways to address our failures. And what happened was there was a full-on academic institution looking at what would happen beyond 2013, because our lives and our world had stopped at 2013, and we all thought that we would never recover from that loss. There was, of course, an image deficit immediately that kicked in, and Bangladesh, in spite of being the most competitive place for labor and prices, of course, we became a threat to the world. So automatically, a lot of questions came up, and Stern started mapping, what would help us, and what about unauthorized subcontracting? You see, when we have too many orders, we start subcontracting, and that is when disasters happen. So Stern started to map all the factories in Bangladesh, and irrespective of whether it was direct directly exporting platforms or whether it was deemed export. It didn't matter. So we pretty much had a clear map of who were exporting out of Bangladesh. And that happened because Stern engaged. And then hope and business grew. At this point, I must make a reference to Ashok Sani, though. I was speaking to his family, and Ashok, one of the family members told me, had once visited factories amongst many of his visits and wondered along with his other colleagues what could be done to better the lives of the workers. And quite interestingly, he turned around to the buyer and he said, why can't we pay 25 cents per piece extra to the workers? And the buyer obviously did not agree. But Ashok wanted that to be a matching grant. He said, why don't we go ahead and do 12 cents or 13 cents and you give the rest? That obviously didn't work, but his vision has not died, because our mission in this corporate sector and beyond is to basically make sure what is it that we can do to make everybody's lives better. So to honor his memory, we are all here tonight. I'm very grateful to the family for having given me a chance to address you all, but also to make everyone aware of where Bangladesh stands today. Today, Bangladesh exports $34 billion plus of ready-made ready-made garments. We have the highest number of LEED certified green factories in the world. So we have around 47 platinum, more than 100 gold factories, and 500 are in the pipeline. And you know what? The decision to turn green didn't come from the buyers. It was not a reactive movement. It was a proactive movement. So this is what Bangladesh has done now. Bangladesh is just not about ticking all the boxes of compliance with regard to structural, fire, and electrical, but Bangladesh is all about going beyond. And we have gone beyond. Now, whether we get the prices, whether our reputation doesn't suffer from any dent is another question altogether, and I'll address all of them in a minute. But let me just assure you that we do have great factories now. Bangladesh has realized it's not just about all these three elements, but it's also about environment and about the social awareness. So industrial relations in Bangladesh is also something that we have been talking about, and we've taken it very, very seriously with many well-meaning partners like ILO, and of course the brands and the unions, and of course academic institutions such as Stern. But Bangladesh still suffers from a couple of deficits. So one, there is a price deficit. Quite interestingly, in the last 4 years, prices from EU has dropped by almost 2.35%. From the States, it's dropped by almost 1.6%. And this is where we fight our battles. So there's an image deficit, there's a price deficit, there is a data deficit, and there's, of course, an academia and industrial linkage deficit. These are the deficits that we grapple with in our day-to-day journey in this sector. Talking about EU and the image deficit, I also want to recall, Mike, a particular instance a few years back when I became the president of the Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association. I did reach out to you, and you accompanied me even to the European Union's Parliament. And you sat through a full-on session where the EU MPs were all there, and they were all talking about, how difficult Bangladesh has been and how difficult sourcing has been. And they brought up all the critical questions relating to labor. And Mike, you were right there supporting us, sitting, and it was a joy because I had somebody by my side saying the same thing, talking about the language of hope, basically. So image deficit has been something that Bangladesh has been really struggling with. Starting from Rana Plaza, very interestingly, we've literally made headlines of all the major newspapers in the world. For days together, we were covered, and in negative light. So that was something that we needed to overcome. And you know what happened in the process was we suffered from, again, the lack of negotiation power. We couldn't negotiate with our buyers. So all we had was just a lot of negative aspersions cast towards us, and all we had was just low prices, irrespective of how good we were with everything. And of course, for us, the manufacturers, we started investing as soon as business started to come back, and it did. By 2015, we were already up at $29 billion. Because all of us were addressing our failures, all of us were trying to do more and more, and we started expanding our lines. Now, very interestingly, while we started expanding our lines, we hardly ever studied our products, and we hardly ever studied whether it would make sense for us to expand beyond what we had then. So it was lack of trade data that also drove an unplanned expansion. So as a result, we cut each other's prices, and we just kept on ticking all the boxes of compliance, and that was it. There was no real data, there was no real research done as to enable us to assess, what products should we have exported, or can we export? For instance, the whole world buys around $9 billion just worth of man-made fiber-based blouses, women's blouses, and Bangladesh only supplies around 300 million. And why is that? And why does Bangladesh have mostly cotton-based production and not man-made fiber-based backward linkages set up? It's because we didn't know better, and we couldn't have. So that is where academic institutions like Stern could basically step in and help us on labor front, and especially because we are addressing the Ashok Sani lecture series, and because Ashok was an all-star dad, a great guy with a great vision, and it's time for us also to talk about what have we done for labor. So yes, we have great industrial relations, and but could we move beyond that? So currently, as Mike introduced me as a Vice Chancellor of Asian University for Women, it's a very interesting university. It's an international university. We have 1,076 women there. And out of the 1,076, they come from 19 nations. We have around 172 Afghan women there. Interestingly enough, we also have 70 ready-made garment workers there. So this is a project we started way back in 2014. So the founder came to me, who's an old friend, and said, can we do something together? And I kind of thought that if we could just move these women beyond the sewing machines and steer them towards education, would that be of help? And at the time when we started the program, and it was a Pathways for Promise program, we started giving them pre-undergrad education for almost 2 years. And we prepared them for university. And so university came to us, to the industry, and started interviewing all our ready-made garment workers, and those especially who were interested. Many of them had forgotten math, English, so they were at a very, very entry level. And for 2 years, through the preparatory program, we prepared them for university education. And I'm very proud to report that currently we have 19 ready-made garment workers who have graduated from the university, and another 20 in the pipeline and about to graduate in the next 2 weeks. And so we'll have almost 40 ready-made garment workers educated, taught by American and European faculty, as well as national faculty. And interestingly enough, those who couldn't even speak English properly now are so, they are one of the best ambassadors of the industry now. They speak impeccable English. Many of them have graduated with PPE degree, politics, philosophy, and economics, and they've majored in economics. Some have majored in environmental science, some in bioinformatics. So it's interesting to see how they have evolved. So it is a special university. So what we did was we thought about also changing that narrative, and perhaps I kind of thought that there was more potential beyond just a university degree. And so my current project, which I very proudly call Project Hope, now we are starting to work with the ready-made garment workers, these graduates, and we are hoping to turn them into entrepreneurs. And once again, like I said, it's been a great 9 years with Stern, literally the association. Now Stern continues to be part of the journey. So now Stern and the Center for Business and Human Rights is coming to Bangladesh to assess primarily these 19 women and see whether they can actually be a part of guided entrepreneurship program. So basically, we will have academics literally guiding these women, along with, of course, sector knowledge from all our parts, and we'll gradually step into that journey, and hopefully they will be garment manufacturers and exporters themselves in no time. So this is a journey which I feel is worth taking. This is a journey that we are talking about today, where we are not talking about just cheap products and cheap labor, but we've moved from that, and we're talking of really, really empowering women to do more. And very happy to also report that there are a number of banks who have agreed to support the project. So at my end, I am enthusiastic, I am happy, and I hope and pray to God that we will ensure and will make sure that these women see the light in manufacturing, in ownership, basically. So I think I've spoken for long enough, Mike. And once again, just to pay a small tribute to Ashok Sani, one of his family members did tell me that he was like a pastor who moved on to the next congregation, to the next journey. And I'm hoping that the corporate sector of Bangladesh will also move on to the next journey with conviction and faith, and make sure that we do much more than we do currently. To all my colleagues, I do say that, do good, look good, and feel good. I hope we continue to do better and better every day. And I hope that this push towards doing more for labor sets into our practice, and the landscape that we have, the manufacturing landscape that we have in Bangladesh, I hope would excel in labor relations in no time. Thank you, Mike, and thank you all.
Well, great, Rubana, wonderful comments. And as anybody listening to you will certainly see, you are a force of nature and a change maker. And I want to ask you, I want to delve a little bit into your own, motivation, how you achieve what you do. You're from a traditional, somewhat conservative society. As I mentioned before, male-dominated industry. There weren't, 50% women on the BGMEA board. There was one, and that was you. And I imagine that everybody was not wildly enthusiastic about you coming out so strongly in favor of all of the things you're describing, the reforms in terms of factory conditions, the empowering of women to become owners, all of the work you've done to modernize the industry, to push back against some of the big brands who are not doing what they need to be doing. Where does that drive come from, and how have you responded when undoubtedly some have come at you and said, why don't you go back and know your place in society? You must get that all the time, and I'd love to hear you just talk about how you respond.
Mike, that's a very provocative question, because it basically takes me back to my 2 years in BGMEA, the association, which is the largest trade body of the country, actually. And I was the first female president to be elected. When I got elected, I think they trusted, because they just wanted to trust me. But then again, I did swim against a lot of negative currents. Yes, being in the board, being the sole female member in the board of 35 did not help. Yes, when COVID especially hit, and that was the time when I was steering the industry, when we had $3.19 billion worth of cancellation, the pressure grew because the industry needed support. The government had extended support. We had extensive negotiations. And once again, we had a portal which recorded every loss. I made sure that every loss was visible to the world so that everybody would wake up and realize that you just cannot have knee-jerk reactions to COVID. So many brands did have knee-jerk reactions and they canceled overnight. And to basically make sure that these orders came back, even at the cost of deferred payments and reduced quantities, we just had to work literally 20 hours a day and got literally no sleep. But we still went on. And in spite of all that, whatever I said, Mike, got recorded in the media. So it was like, the social media, the electronic media, traditional and non-traditional media platforms were just buzzing with whatever I said. So if I had said that, we can do more, it just became another headline, meaning, they're not doing more. So it just wasn't the pressure of the board. It just wasn't the pressure of, male members of the industry telling me that, you ought to be leading us better, but it was also the pressure of the society. So, South Asian mindset sets favor male domination. So I'm of course very proud to report that today most of my colleagues say that I did a good job. So I'm happy that I could steer the industry into a safe shore, especially at a time when we had nothing. So I had to work doubly hard, Mike, because not all of us pay our workers digitally. We do give them cash, but when the government announced the incentives, the stimulus packages, they made sure that every payment had to be done digitally. So literally in less than 10 days, I had to turn the whole industry into a digital mode. So everybody had to register, everybody had to have transparent books, book of accounts, and everybody had to just make sure that they went digital because that was a prerequisite. So I did accept a lot of challenges and I did move on. And what gave me hope and faith? Well, I think it was my children who always stood by me. And I think it was a few loyal friends who would always be there. But then again, also my personal experience. I think there are a few things in my life which have taught me to fight back harder and with faith and conviction and courage. And that's one of the reasons perhaps why I never give up and why I feel that I ought to do better every day. And one of my daily prayers is, God, make me better tomorrow. I don't know in what capacity, just make me better and make sure that I can give back to the community. So that's it, I guess, Mike.
So you mentioned some of your own personal challenges and tragedies. I briefly met your husband, Anasol, who died, I guess, in 2017 after a terrible illness. You also lost a son. How much did those personal challenges and tragedies, some people would have sort of shrunk up and said, I can't cope. You did the opposite. You became stronger. How do you explain that?
I lost my youngest son to osteosarcoma, a cancer, in 2002. And I lost my husband in 2017. Speaking of my husband, he was a great guy, a great partner, and he taught me a lot. And Anis moved on from his corporate entity and eventually joined politics and became the mayor of the city of Dhaka. And that was in 2015. So he served as a mayor for 2 years, and then he died a hero. The death was unfortunate, unexpected, very sudden. So, all my life, Mike, I've been dealing with uncertainties. We both came from a very, very middle-class background. We had nothing, no car to our name, no houses, no nothing when we came together. And then when we did come together, we did build whatever little that we've built today. And we had 4 children together. And today I'm proud to again say that I'm a grandmother of 4. So my kids stood by me, and ever since 2017, they're the ones who actively look after business. And I move on and I do what I want to do. So when I lost my youngest son, and what I did was I turned my grief into strength. And I set up a school for 600 kids in our factories, and moved on. I thought, and his name was Sharaf, and I thought I would see more Sharafs there. And I did. So for me, what's more important is to tell everyone that it's not worth giving up. You cannot give up. And once again, reference to Ashok Sani, he lives on. He lives on amongst his family members, amongst us, and amongst his children, his wife, his nephew, his sister, and everyone else, and amongst us, of course, at those who are at NYU. We cannot give up on the vision. We cannot give up on the moment of sunrise. Sunsets are important, but sunrises are far more important. It's important to look at dawn and hope and pray for it and wish for it. So in spite of the darkness, in spite of all that weighs us down when tragedy hits us, it's important to remember that we just need to soar new heights every day. And we just need to be better. So strength counts, and courage certainly helps.
I can keep going here all night with Rubana, but I want to encourage others to ask questions as well. You can go on your screen to the Q&A and just type in a question, and I will see it, and we will get more of you into the conversation. While people are typing their questions in, Rubana, I want to ask you about a little bit about what you mentioned at the end of your remarks about what's happening at the Asian University for Women, and this idea of bringing former garment workers into the school to get a proper education, and then having them dream the big dream as well and think about becoming entrepreneurs. That clearly wouldn't have happened without your prodding, nudging, and also your willingness to stand behind them, to find the banks, to find the Western brands. But tell us a little bit about, I'd be particularly interested in your impressions and your thoughts about when you first raised this issue with the 19 graduates and said, how would you like to own a factory? What was the reaction, and how much did you need to kind of overcome their disbelief that they could actually be entrepreneurs rather than working in a factory?
I would really like to mention, Mike, that both me and the founder of the university, Kamal, both have their confidence. So they believed me instantly. I still remember it was a Zoom session, and I said, if you want to become an entrepreneur, if you want to own a garment factory, please raise hands. And all the hands went up. I mean, all the hands went up at one go. And 4 or 5 of them immediately said, we want to lead this project. So there was instant excitement, Mike. I didn't have to do much. And now I'm getting regular mail saying, when are we being guided for this journey? So they believed it, and their backgrounds, and I did extensive interviews with all of them, including the ones at the factory. So I basically thought that it was important to track their ambition level the aspiration level. So I conducted 55 interviews with the workers who haven't come to the university. And they're still behind the sewing lines. And when I tracked their aspiration level, it's at an all-time low, because they really cannot look beyond where they are right now. So does poverty hinder your aspiration level? Absolutely. But looking at these 19, and when I interviewed them, it's a totally different story. They convey their story with a lot of pride. There is no shame in their upbringing or their background. They come to you. You called me a force of nature. I'm nowhere near them, Mike. They're way, way more energetic, way more positive than I ever will be. It is the voice of youth. It is the voice of these women who look forward to true empowerment. So, I mean, they believed me instantly. But a couple of them talked about their preferences. Most of them wanted to become closely related to finance. So I said, what would you like to do? Most of them said that I want to work with the finance, or I want to head the finance. Some said, I want to push the efficiency level up in the production lines. So can I just work with production? Some said, I want to concentrate on compliance. So and some even said, I want to work with industrial relation. So I have 19 fascinating young women who are ready to go out there. And with all your help, I hope that we will make it there.
Great. Really following up on that, we have a question from Sani, who says, how do families, especially fathers, feel about their daughters getting educated at AUW? In the conservative societies in which they live, most parents want their daughters to get married and be homemakers.
Thank you for the question. Thank you. Actually, most families support, because it's a very different university. It's a university which encourages first gens to come in. So 87% of the enrollment is funded. Only 13% are fee-paying students. So it's a very interesting mix. When the ready-made garment workers started going to the university, automatically, many fee-paying parents would ask me that, why did you bring them in? And I would have, quite a challenging time just to explain to them that it was important to have an inclusive society. And without this, we wouldn't be able to go far. So, and as for the families of the first gens who come into the university, including, we also have landless farmers' children coming into the university. So interestingly, there's a lot of enthusiasm, Suresh, and they believe in what the university does, because we've had graduates going into many Ivy League institutions in the United States. So I think it's not with. I don't think they're skeptical about the university education. I think they believe in us, so they come. And we just had our first admission tests last week. And believe me, when I walked into the university, I could see so many parents with their expectant eyes, just waiting for their children to come out. And they were mostly fathers. So fathers do support education. And, society is also changing. We are evolving at a far more positive pace now.
Great. So Bhati asks, Rubana, you've offered a compelling vision for a higher value-added Bangladesh manufacturing industry. And yet she asks, the obstacles seem very high. What should global brands, international organizations, and the local government in Bangladesh do to make that vision achievable?
The value addition has been a challenge, Mike, for most of us in the industry. We literally export around more than $6 billion worth of just basic cotton t-shirt. We literally export another 6 billion of cotton women's and men's trousers. The whole world is going towards man-made fiber, and Bangladesh has increased its consumption of cotton from 64% to 74%. It's just going the opposite way. So a lot of R&D is required in the sector. So we need academic institutions to come forward with help of research. That's one. For value addition, I mean, it's a time for all the international brands to realize that Bangladesh just isn't a producer of cheap products. Bangladesh has the highest number of, like I said, the LEED certified green factories. We do great products now. Why don't we have, if we can do green products, why don't we have the green prices? I mean, we talk about sustainability. Bangladesh is leading in the field of sustainability, and yet, why do we have this disconnect between perception and reality? How can we bridge this? What can we do better? Well, first, I mean, there is again a mutual trust deficit between the international brands and the manufacturers. We need to overcome that. They need to believe that Bangladesh, the country concept of Bangladesh basically, Mike, does not support production of higher value-added product. I mean, how many brands would trust Bangladesh to do great suits? Very few. I mean, that's the direction. That's the goal. I mean, R&D is something that will help us get there. So from the government, we've had great moves. Like we now also have started, with the help of the government, we have started a few rooftop solar plant installations. So we have net metering there, and we are also not only producing our power, we are also selling back to the national grid. That's an interesting project. So pilots like this have come in. We've started tracking SDG goals in factories. So the more reporting is done, the better we are. And partners like you could help spread the story more. Now, the story of garment manufacturers helping garment workers become owners themselves is a great one. If it comes true, hopefully it will immediately in the near future, in the next 3-4 months, and we'll have something, a narration of pride to share with the rest of the world. And it's a very replicable initiative. It's not as if that it's a one-off. So I think it's important for all of us to come together and do our bit and make sure that we actually go towards value addition and not just produce the basics. But then again, Mike, a lot of investment needs to be done in man-made fiber-based product in Bangladesh. A Korean company, Young One, is doing a great job. They've started producing man-made fiber-based fabric so that it can cater to local consumption. So we are hoping that with proper backward linkage, with proper research support, the sector will be doing better. And of course, with the trust of the brands who will just not worry about the reputational risk, but actually actively engage with Bangladesh manufacturers and take the industry to the next level. And we have also the LDC challenge. We are graduating very soon. So we will have many of our privileges, trade privileges taken off. So we have, as we have everything but arms arrangement with EU. So whatever we export to the European Union is zero taxed. It's not taxed at all. But as soon as we graduate from the LDC category, immediately, we either have to go for an extended EB arrangement with the EU through negotiation, extensive negotiation, and also we'll have to support our backward linkage 100%, because that's one of the key prerequisites of the LDC graduation narrative.
So what you just said is that Bangladesh is about to move in the next maybe couple of years out of the category of the least developed states, and there's some trade benefits that go with that. We've been talking for a long time about Western governments and Western brands stepping up and becoming more partners with your industry, with your government, and what we call shared responsibility. What is it going to take to get let's say, the US government or the EU governments to kind of be real partners in what you're talking about, rather than, as you've described, Bangladesh has historically been seen as a place to produce the cheapest products at the lowest price. And what you're now advocating is it's time to move to the next level. In fact, the country is no longer as desperately poor as it was 10 or 20 years ago. And now there has to be an evolution in the manufacturing base. How do we get the American government of big American brands or their European counterparts to buy into this vision? And because it will inevitably depend on them to play a role.
Mike, you can actually do a lot.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
because you already have Natasha and Hannah are working on a very good initiative, and I hope that ethical sourcing and ethical supply both will become an integral part of the narrative. We need to map what's exactly going on in the industry. What are the practices that the brands have? How do they give us the orders? What is the lead time that they give? What is it that they offer us? So traditionally, it used to be 120 days production lead time. Right now, we are even at a 30 days lead time for many brands, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, even 3.5. For the fabric which is manufactured locally, they're booking the grade and they're saying you have to supply because there's a question of fast fashion. Now, what do we do with fast fashion? How do we change that? How do we get the consumer off the track of just buying one and getting another free? The buy one get one free concept has to change. And with COVID having struck us, the pattern of consumerism has also changed. It's just not about buying whatever. It's about being conscious about customizing products. And more custom-made options are appearing on the manufacturing landscape. So we are probably producing more, but across different styles. It's no more 50,000 pieces one style. It's 10 styles and 50,000 pieces, but maybe not 50. Maybe we have grown to 100. But substantially, we're looking at evolution of consumption having changed. So it's just not about talking about buying less. It's also about buying quality. Now here, Mike, we also need to collectively track how consumers are dealing with sustainability. There are lots of brands who are just saying, buy less of our product, mend it, send it to our supply centers, and it's a great concept. But what about striking a good balance between the consciousness of the Western consumer who's basically wearing their second skin, their apparel, and thinking about buying less and linking it to sustainable livelihood in the producing countries? While the Western world, opt for nearshoring and talk about buying less from us, what happens to all these lives? These 4.4 million workers, what happens to them? They're not going to be coders overnight. They don't have the skills. They don't have the education level. What do we do to reskill them or making them more aligned towards sustainable production? How sustainable are we at the industry? I mean, we are doing a great job, but we could do better. And so can the brands. So the time to do finger pointing and indulging in blame game, it's time for all of us to stop this and come together in a collaborative platform and track each other's habits, supplying habits, sourcing habits, and see where we are all going wrong. And it can be a win-win situation for all, Mike, for sure, if we just look harder. So I do have a standard tagline for most of the brands. I always say, go human, go green. So first, go human first, and then talk about going green. Because without sustainable lives, there is no industry, there is no supply, there's no tomorrow. So it's people who come first, people before product. So as long as we have that in mind, I think that'll be a good reminder for us all.
Suresh is back with a question about the elephant in the room, which is the role of China in all of this. And he asks about relating to ethical sourcing and ethical supply. He says 16% of the cotton from US clothes, for US clothes, comes from Xinjiang, China, but there's forced, as we've talked about, forced labor, more than 1 million people being detained, Uyghurs in Xinjiang, which the Chinese are trying to hide. He says private companies in the US that speak out about this get their products boycotted and they lose big sales and profits. Should the private sector be responsible, he asks, for enforcing human rights for the Uyghurs, or should the public sector, like the US government, it was easy for private companies to step up in Bangladesh because they didn't have to rely so much on local sales there. China's different. As you know, and just one added footnote to the question, which is a good question, the Uyghur Forced Labor Protection Act actually goes into effect in June, in 21 days. And it will basically, the presumption will be if products are known to be coming from this Xinjiang province in China, they're not going to be allowed in the United States. It's easy to say that. How it's implemented is something else. But that's the first measure, at least by the US government, to take this on. Rubana, what do you say about China?
Now, the capacity in China cannot be replaced by just Bangladesh. Right. But alternative sourcing destinations must pop up. And we depend a lot on China. Even much of our woven product comes from China, the raw material. We import a lot. While we stand with the concept and the sentiment of not sourcing from the regions that engage in forced labor, I don't know, Mike. I mean, legislation certainly help, but the implementation, as you yourself said, how far and they can enforce this is something that we don't know. And there, as you know yourself, there are lots of shadows, there are lots of loopholes that private sector will always find. You know, big brands sourcing from those regions will always find ways to work around the legislation. And I hope that will change with time. And no region should be indispensable. So if we are truly committed to the narrative of human rights, I can only hope that Bangladesh will have great times coming, because we'll be flooded with orders. That's something that we certainly look forward to. But I mean, also to address you, Suresh, there's a big cycle of hypocrisy in all of it. I mean, when it comes to other countries, it's never the level playing field for Bangladesh. Because of Rana Plaza, we've had to really step up, and others haven't. Others just don't offer that kind of transparency into the supply supply management system, and we've had to do it. So it was prescriptive, literally, a top-down approach in our case. But right now we're working with bottoms-up approach. Now we've come up with a ready-made garment sustainability council. It's called RSC, where brands and the unions and the manufacturers sit in the same platform, and we decide things together. That's a different ballgame altogether. But there, again, the trust-building exercises are painful because we never seem to look at the other perspectives. So I think it's important for us to realize that in order to address China and in order to address the big elephant, there has to be a lot of transparency and a lot of awareness building amongst the US brands. So the public sector, the government can push the private sector to become more transparent and to come out and make sense of the profit margins that they have. It's just should not be about just the margins. It's about the margins of your consciousness. I mean, how much are we doing to basically protect the margins and to expand into doing good? So it's a wake-up call Mike and Suresh, I just hope and pray to God that the implementation is going to be easy. But I can tell you it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. But we look forward to a great future.
Yeah. So we're almost at the end of the hour here. And I must say, if this is how clear and energetic you can be at 4 a.m, I can't imagine what you would do at noon, but you've been fantastic. We're in a university and we have some students on the line, and I would love you to end, perhaps you've come to my class, you sort of have a sense of what goes on at Stern. What would be some wisdom, advice to business students today coming out of an American university like Stern? What are some of the things you would think that they should be thinking about in terms of their own future, and both professionally and personally?
Well, I think, Mike, in your own class, you talk about it all the time. You're always talking about business and human rights together. I think it's important for the students to realize, and I'm sure they do, and that's why they come to your class, is that you cannot do business in isolation. You have to be connected to the rest of the world also. And I talked about the difference between perception and reality towards the beginning of the lecture. And it's on you, the young people, to bridge that, to correct that, and to address that also. So I think you should come out to the manufacturing countries more. You should look at our realities and make sure that you teach us and you take back lessons to your own spaces and help us be better. So I think more interaction with the industries, more interaction with the third world, more interaction with the people who come from humble beginnings. I think that polishes your skills and readies you, prepares you for your life, for your tomorrows. So I wish you great tomorrows. I wish you would come here and engage with us, and maybe also become a partner of our Project Hope that we are doing with Stern. And I hope that you'll come teach the first gen students. I hope you'll come and engage with industries here and see, what is it that you can do to make us better. We need your research support. We need your enthusiasm. We need your criticism in order to be better. So welcome to the world where we are, and I hope that you come soon.
Great. Well, Rubana, you are fantastic, and this has been a wonderful hour. I want to thank you first and foremost, but also the Sani family for sponsoring, to Bhatia, and to everybody who's been on the line. It's been a really wonderful discussion. We'll let you go back to sleep and everybody have a wonderful evening. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you.